about black everything.
Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined today by my friend, Professor Robert Reid-Pharr, who is Professor of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Harvard University. He's the author of many amazing books, including the recent Archives of Flesh, African America, Spain, and Post-Humanist Critique, published by NYU Press 2016. The classic Conjugal Union, The Body, the House, and the Black American, Oxford University Press 1999, Black Gay Man, Essays, also published by NYU in 2001, and my favorite, Once You Go Black, Choice, Desire, and the Black American Intellectual, which was also published by NYU in 2007. One critic said of Black Gay Man, in Reid-Pharr's writing about Mr. Hemphill. Reid-Pharr's words speak volumes about the importance of Hemphill's work as a poet and an activist, but also about the work of those who were touched by Hemphill personally, intellectually. In this regard, Black Gay Man is no less a fitting tribute in and of itself to the importance of the work being done in Black queer studies and Black studies as a whole. That was me writing about you 15 years ago. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm doing quite well, super well. And thank you for those words. You know, it's so funny that one of the things about Black Gay Men, and I think that you'll understand that one of the ways in which I think about what the job of intellectuals is that I felt like when I was writing that book that I needed to pay some debts. And one of the debts that I needed to pay was to Essex Hemphill and to a whole set of men, particularly Black and gay men, who were really incredibly useful to me as I developed as an adult and developed as an ethical person.
Yeah, I always, wanted to tell you, and I might have on many occasions, Black Gay Man in particular helped me work through trying to find language around Black queer criticism as a heterosexual Black man writing about popular culture to find some comfort with the language and some comfort with the theory. You were at the cutting edge of what we might think of as Black queer studies, particularly from the standpoint of Black masculinity. Yourself, of course, E. Patrick Johnson, Dwight McBride. The field is in a very different place now.
You think? Yeah.
How do you feel about the trajectory of the field of Black queer thought? Of course, we now have to consider the very realness of Black trans studies within the context of this, and how this has directly really impacted what we think of as the Black Studies Project.
Look, I am 53 years old, and in the generation when I came of age, really, it was also, you have to remember, the age of the AIDS pandemic really burning through Black communities and burning through this country. So to be frank about it, I'm just so grateful to be going through the aging process.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And I'm frankly grateful to be part of a tradition that has outgrown me. And so there are times when I complain to my friends, I'll say that every time I turn around there's a new Black genius who's chasing after me. And so I think that is a positive thing. And I think that it's a good thing to be a mature scholar, a person who's built his brand and built his career, who nonetheless has people who are doing things that I don't understand fully, or things that are actually outside of my purview, and I have to continue to do my homework to keep up. I find that incredibly healthy. I'm very, very glad about that. And certainly I'll say that one of the things that is particularly challenging to me is that when I began doing the work that I was doing, nobody was talking about trans anything, really.
Right.
And I cannot believe how quickly that has developed in this country, including people like Riley Snorton, for example, who are doing amazing work around race and trans studies all at the same time. And I'm glad that people are coming at things in ways, I'm glad that people are coming at things in ways that surprise me. And I also think that queer studies needed probably to be pushed beyond what it thought its limits actually were, and to realize that it itself can be conservative and itself can be constraining. And I'm glad to be forced into a situation in which I have to understand that my own identity and the way that I think is not the only way that people think. Those are not the only questions on the table.
If we look at the Black Studies Project going back 20 years, there's obviously a critique of Black studies that's coming from Black feminist thinkers. There's a Black queer critique of Black studies. Black studies in the main, you could argue, was incredibly resistant to these critiques, right? I mean, what we recognized, 20 years ago, folks who were doing this kind of progressive work for very often doing it through gender and sexuality studies programs. They were doing it through English departments. They weren't necessarily doing it in the mainstream of Black Studies departments.
Right.
Do you still feel that's the case now? Do you think Black Studies has become, as a project, more accommodating?
Yes, I do. I really do. And when you go around and you look at Black Studies program, the Black Studies programs that I know, let's be clear about that.
Right.
When you look at the Black Studies program that I know, there are lots of people doing, or at least a significant number of people doing work around gender and sexuality studies in all types of ways. At the same time, the institutionalization of Black Studies has meant that institutionalization does what institutionalization does, and that is that it allows for people to have solid bases to do their work, but it also means that there are certain blinders that get put on. So for me personally, I've wanted to continue to do the work that I've always done around gender and sexuality, but also to have a much more transnationalist approach and to start to move past some of the my own limitations as a scholar, meaning that I wish that I had been doing work about the African diaspora more. I wish that I had been more multilingual. I wish that I was looking at ways of thinking about gender and sexuality that are not so American bound.
Which is what Archives of the Flesh really
I'm trying my best with that. Yeah, I'm trying my best. But you know, the interesting thing about it is that I didn't begin really seriously studying Spanish until the 21st century. And so, you know, it took a lot of effort in order to just get my skill set together. And it's something when I say that, oh gosh, I turn around and there's a new Black genius who's behind me, all of them seem to be multilingual, you know. And so one of the things that you have to do as a scholar, I'm sure that you know this, that you have to continually be retooling, but that's a hard thing to do when you're also being asked to do a million other things.
Because, you know, you're being asked to retool, but you're also you're asked to be retool at the time where some things are shifting and they're like a fad moment, right? I mean, that, you know, my honest feeling about, say, something like Afro-pessimism is like, do I spend 3 years retooling on Afro-pessimism for it not to be a thing?
Right, that is exactly right. That is exactly right. And I think that actually, to look at this from the other direction, what you've just said is something that I think needs to be said to people who are at the beginning of their careers or people who are creative persons who are maybe a little bit younger than you and I. Because I see all the time folks getting caught up in stuff that they think, oh, if I don't fight this particular Twitter battle to the death tonight.
Are you on Twitter?
No, you know, the thing is,
I knew you weren't.
you know, the thing is, I actually have a Twitter account which I never use, but I do read other people's tweets, and I always think, gosh, this massive controversy is going to be gone next week, or next month, or next year. And I wonder whether or not people need to think more about what it is to pace themselves and to understand that, look, we are a part, especially in Black studies, especially also in women, gender, and sexuality studies, we're part of a centuries-long tradition of struggle. We haven't won the battle yet, but you have to be doing things that are going to last over the long term. And so I'm not going to speak to the Afro-pessimism thing, but I definitely understand the feeling of, do I want to retool and stuff that may not be so significant next year or 5 years from now. I agree with that.
I want to ask you a bit about process, particularly with the new book. The new book seems as though it was much more of a deliberate process. And let me explain what I mean by that. Part of what I actually loved about Black Gay Man, and particularly once you go Black, was you weren't trying to be perfect. You were trying to be provocative and get some ideas out there on the page. I think too often, particularly for younger scholars, we think of the book as this finished thing, as opposed to the book or the books being a kind of ongoing process, right? And so there's a way in which, if I look at the trajectory of your career and I look at Once You Go Black and what you're trying to open up there, it takes you to the new book.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. But I think the idea that most scholars don't feel the freedom just to put their ideas out there.
Right. Look, I think that even with Archives of Flesh, I definitely feel that that book is procedural. I definitely hope that it's leading me to places that I don't, places that I cannot yet imagine. And I'll say to you, my favorite parts of it are the places that I think echo, in fact, with Black Gay Men. So there's a section in which I talk about a woman who was killed in my neighborhood, and it's very, very important to me. And when you talk about just getting the ideas out there, I could never make it exactly fit with what I was trying to do in that chapter of the book. But I knew emotionally that this was a story that needed to be told, and I refused to not allow her name to be remembered in the way that I could do it. And so I say in it, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to produce some type of super highfalutin theoretical thing, and I can do sort of theory. I'm a pointy-headed guy. I can do theory with everybody else. But instead of saying I'm going to fix this rhetorically or theoretically or conceptually or however, I decided that the best thing to do is to let those sutures be shown. Let people see the fact that this is something I think that is important to do politically, ethically, emotionally for me. And it's important to do for the communities that I literally physically live in. But at the same time, I'm not sure how to actually get that. I'm not sure how to actually make all of this work. And I think that in terms of activism generally, whether or not that's activism in the streets or activism on the page, that one of the things that you have to understand is that half measures are okay if those are the only measures that you have available to you. Yeah. And so half measures are particularly okay if they're measures that are taken in good faith and are measures that are taken because you're trying to move us towards the beloved community. Yeah.
Talk about why the transnational move was so important for you with this new work.
Well, I'll tell you the truth, and then I'll tell you the other truth. So the truth is that I really, for a set of very clumsy reasons, became the director of an African Diaspora Institute at my former place of employment, the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. That was a transformative moment for me, and I began to understand that, in fact, I am an African American person. I am a member of the African diaspora. In a way that I think for a lot of Black American people, including me, I am a native North Carolinian, that native North Carolinians, when I was coming up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s in the state, were not were not quick to call themselves African people.
Right. Or African American.
Or African American. Right. And certainly, it wasn't even that it was so much a slur against persons born on the African continent, but the fact that our culture in the state of North Carolina is so rich and so full that our sense was we are Black people, this is who we are, this is how we're going to name ourselves. And I understand that, and I participate in it, and I respect folks who think that way and have been a person who thinks that way. So I wanted to move to the next level of understanding that, hey, we need to be talking cross-nationally, we need to be moving, we need to be doing politics cross-nationally because we're part of a larger community that includes persons born on the African continent and persons in the African diaspora in Europe, Latin America, in the Americas, all over the world. And that we're part of many diasporas. We in this room, we represent all people on the planet. So that's the truth. And the other truth is that in my personal life, I was growing and wanting to be more supported as an individual and have a larger group of people who just sort of got where I was coming from. And a lot of that, in fact, was happening through travel, particularly to Spain. And a lot of where I was opening up is that I was becoming a bilingual person and then later a multilingual person. And because of that, I was spending a bunch of time in Spain and coming into contact with Black Spaniards who were saying to me, we really should be doing work on the fact that there's a deep connection between Spain and the African continent, and also there's a deep connection between Spain and African American life and culture that no one ever talks about.
Right.
And why don't you do that work? And that literally went on for a decade. Literally went on for a decade. Now these are conversations that didn't happen in classrooms. They happened in bars and on beaches and in people's homes. But it was a very, very, very consistent conversation that I was having with people in Espanol, about who people are also, by the way, putting food in my mouth and trying to get me to understand what the hell the subjunctive was. About, hey, we need you, why aren't you doing work that's about all of us? Where they're saying, look, you're part of us too. Yeah. And so, I literally sat in my couch one day and was thinking, what am I going to do next? And what is it that I can contribute, and what is it that I want to do? And I thought I can do a work on the relationship between African American intellectuals and Spain. And the funny thing is, my friend said, we've been waiting for you to get on with this. You've been talking about it for years. You just didn't know that you were talking about it for years. So,
Yeah. How does it feel to be kind of an OG of the field these days?
OG already?
I mean, because again, and I gestured to this earlier, I mean, in many ways, you're part of that cohort that helped, at least in the academy, but after the Joseph Beams and folks of those nature, really helped create a field.
Thank you so much for saying that. From one OG to another. Look, the truth of the matter is that I'm certain that you get it that I'm two people all at once. So I'm a settled intellectual. I talk to people who are junior to me all the time. I have real advice to give to people, and I do the work that I'm supposed to do in terms of making sure that not only opening the door, that's one thing, but keeping the door open, that's another type of work, right?
Right.
But intellectually, I still feel like a kid and a full-on novice.
Yeah.
I never really know what I'm talking about. I just know that there's stuff that I'm interested in. So I'm as passionate about new topics and interesting stuff as I was 25 years ago when I entered the profession. I cannot believe that 25 years has happened. Only my body it reminds me that 25 years have in fact passed. So it feels good. It feels good. And it was this year is the first year that I started to think, oh my gosh, I better get ready for retirement.
But the retirement piece means you stop teaching, but it doesn't mean you stop thinking and stop writing.
One of the reasons that I'm interested in retiring is because I want more time to actually do work.
Yeah.
I know that's a funny thing, right?
No, I get it. I absolutely get it.
Listen, actually, the other part of that is that in order to be a responsible person in the profession, one of the things that you've got to do is that you have got to sit down at your desk and write those letters of recommendation. You've got to sit down at your desk and make those telephone calls. You've got to sit down at your desk and do the administrative work that you got to do. And some of the administrative work is making sure that the other people around you are helping are being treated well.
Right.
And none of it's glamorous.
Tenure files, right? And it's like, I'd like to think that we were raised in a way that we always stood that was part of the game. That we had to kind of, as we came up, we had to pass it forward. And this is that administrative, that boring, non-sexy, don't give you any time for Twitter work, is the work that has to be done.
The funny thing is, I remember as an undergraduate and especially as a graduate student going in to talk to professors who were unbelievably good to me. And and you walk in for the 17th time you've walked in.
Randomly,
and they're just like, and you could see that it's like, I wish this person would just leave my office. And I'm on the other side of that desk now, and I often think, oh my God, didn't I have this conversation with you already? But, a little bit of humility helps me to remember that you got to give. And part of the giving process is that that you're not going to be told, and every time you do something for someone, you shouldn't expect that somebody's going to give you a Medal of Honor, and that's the way that it goes. The other part of it is that you have to figure out how to care for yourself so that you can live, and care for your body, care for your spirit, care for your peeps, and make sure that you are able to get up in the morning and have all of that energy and have that presence of mind and also that kindness of spirit that has to be nurtured outside. That has to be nurtured everywhere, both at work and inside the classroom and inside your office, but also in your family life and your friendship life and all of that stuff as well. I try to work on it. The people talk about work-life balance. I've yet to meet anybody who actually has it.
Right.
But I try to work on it.
Stellar advice from an OG in the field. Robert Reid-Pharr, who's a professor of women's gender and sexuality studies at Harvard University. He's here visiting Duke as part of our Slavery and Freedom Lab. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, my brother. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.
Thank you.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black, everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black.